Hello. Hello again. How's everybody doing? Good? How's everybody doing? Good. That's right. That's better. Welcome to our third faculty reading of what? Our inaugural Queer Week. We're so happy that you're here. You know, we're already planning Queer Week for next year, so buckle up. We're glad you're here, and these events, if you haven't been here yesterday and the day before, take place every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday all summer long, and they're free and open to the public, so I hope you'll come back regularly and often, because they're wonderful events. Yeah, they're great. Tonight we're going to hear from writers Melissa Febos and Andrea Lawlor, and who is incidentally and importantly the curator of our Queer Week this year. Yes, and they're going to each read from their work, and then we're going to do a Q&A afterwards. Housekeeping. I'm sorry if you've been here every night. This is for like the 4 people who weren't here the last 2 nights. Melissa and Andrea's books will be for sale at the back of the room, and they will be signing their books after the event. There's books from all the other faculty from this year available back there also, and also in the bookstore in between the 2 halves of the gallery. Speaking of which, there's a wonderful show. Everyone we know is here in the gallery right now. It's our summer exhibition featuring work by former Falk Fellows and curated by former fellow Heidi Hahn. I encourage you to see it if you haven't seen it already. Big shout out to East End Books, as always, for being the curators of our bookstore in the back. Restrooms are still down the hall, and the sign-up sheet for tomorrow's student night is very full. So now if you're one of the few people who hasn't signed up for it, please do. You really will be, you'll be glad you did. And finally, turn off your cell phones. And now to get us started, I would like to invite one of Andrea's students, Melanie McNair, up to the stage to introduce Andrea.
Hello, I'm Melanie. Andrea Lawlor. When one reads the work of Andrea Lawlor, one finds dueling sentiments that seem to go hand in hand, at some moments yet contradicting each other the next. Their work is described by The Guardian as offering a hymn to the pleasures of gender fluidity and a tribute to queer theory in LGBT communities. The New York Times describes their work as difficult to quote in a family newspaper. I found their novel when I was a bookseller, and when I went to pay for it, my colleagues said, "Oh, you'll love it. It's filthy." And it truly is, in the best ways. I took it with me to the queer beach, and whenever someone asked if it was good, I would blush furiously and say, "Yes, you'll love it. It's filthy." It is my hope that in doing so, I turned more readers on to being turned on by their work. It also gave language to concerns I had been quietly turning over in my mind about the intersections of desire, power, and gender. I was teaching women, gender, and sexuality studies at the time, but the academic papers we read in class hovered at the level of intellectuality. Andrea's work gave these concerns skin. I was going to quote a passage, but they're going to read, so I won't do that. Harper's Bazaar praises Lawlor's ability to spin together fantasy with issues of gender and sex. This ability was developed through their first chapbook position papers, sharpened through their novel Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl, and shines through a series of essays published most recently in Electric Lit, Mother, and Huffington Post. They won a 2020 Whiting Award for Fiction and were previously a finalist for the Lambda Literary and CLMP Firecracker Awards. Based in Western Massachusetts, they currently edit fiction for Fence Magazine and teach at Mount Holyoke College. Y'all, please give your love to Andrea Lawlor.
Hello, thank you so much, Melanie, for that amazing, beautiful introduction. And I'm going to read extremely tame things tonight. Thank you so much, everybody at Fox, David and Sarah, Sharon, Bree, Miracle, and all the staff here at the Fine Arts Work Center for having us, and all my fellow faculty for saying yes. Thank you so much for coming, and all the students. My class is amazing, and everybody here is so wonderful to talk to. I'm having the best week. I'm actually gonna read a little bit of Paul, two small fairy tales that are part of the book, and then I'm gonna read some poetry, so changing the tempo a little bit. So in this novel, Paul is a shapeshifter. It's 1993. Iowa City is where the book starts, and many people here have Iowa City connections, so we can all talk about that later. But the two small fairy tales I'm going to read are these sort of like part of this series of little interstitial tales, and they come up irregularly through the book, and I thought I'll start us out in a kind of fairy tale time, a fairy tale past. So this is the first one. Once upon a time, there was a sweet, darling young wolf who lived alone in the forest and loved pretty things. Now, this wolf was a strange wolf, quite small, maybe part coyote on his mother's side, or maybe his father was a fox, no one knew. The pack had reared him after his mother died, as the pack does, but he knew they did not mind his absence, found him easier to miss than accommodate. Out on his own, the young wolf had been lonely at first, but also happy to be in the center of such beauty. The wolf loved the little violets that grew in the grass, the dappled sunlight on soft pine needles, the sharp, shiny icicles hanging from the trees, the little thatched cottage where the old human woman lived, maybe even the old human woman herself. He studied her every day, admiring her soft, furless skin like fallen leaves, her silver and red hair, so like his own handsome coat, her raspy bark, how she gestured delicately with her thin little paws. He watched her read her books by the fire, soak in her clawfoot tub, mate occasionally with a bad-smelling woodsman. What did she think about, he wondered. Why did she do the things she did? The young wolf struck up a camaraderie with an old fox who also lived near the cottage. Sometimes the old fox and the young wolf watched the human woman together, with no discussion. Did they love her? Want to eat her? The wolf didn't know. One morning, having gone out of his way to avoid the nasty-smelling woodsman, the wolf found himself near the loud, bland human path through the undergrowth. He snacked on a few blackberries here and there, and made one desultory pass at a too-quick rabbit as he wandered pleasurably through the undergrowth. As he neared the path, the wolf smelled something disturbing, human adolescent, commingled with old milk, dead meat, smoke, and yeast. He could hear the blundering human sounds, crunching footsteps, a low song. He crept closer to look, and a child, really a maiden, passed. The maiden was a younger version of the old woman, a sort of pup, draped in a gorgeous, expensive-seeming, blood-red cloak. The wolf thought he might like to wear that cloak. He felt mysteriously compelled to reveal himself, but he did not know how to do so without frightening the human maiden, and so stayed hidden. He consulted with his friend the fox. "Ah, yes," said the old fox. There is more to you than meets the eye, isn't there?" "I don't know," said the wolf sadly. "I don't know what I am." The old fox smiled a dangerous, toothy smile. "I will try to teach you," he said. "You may learn, you may not." After many days and nights, the young wolf did learn some small measure of the old fox's teaching. When the maiden next came up the human path, the young wolf knew mostly what to do. He revealed himself, and when the maiden went still with fear, the young wolf pounced right into her, just like that. The young wolf stroked his furless soft hands, cuddled into the longed-for velvety red cloak, and set off, weak but tall, to meet his beloved old human woman. So that's one of them. And then I'm going to read another kind of gay fairy tale. Many years ago, A fleet of currachs bearing poor farmers and their beasts sailed neatly across the small, mild sea. The people on the mainland greeted the farmers happily, for they had land to spare and a delight in the new. They intermarried, traded goods, and learned to speak each other's languages. And all was easy in the little kingdom. Even the old king welcomed the newcomers. His own mother had once left the other world for this one, and the lilt of the farmer's speech made him wistful for his childhood. One day, the king's eldest son took off riding with his royal companions. They rode for hours and hours, far out into the land. The prince grew tired of his companions and their dull talk of serving girls and farmers' daughters. When his hounds tore off into a grove of oaks, the prince broke from the others and followed the echoing howls. The young prince came finally to a clearing where he found his hounds baring their teeth at another pack. The stranger dogs, handsome in their fine red collars, were feasting on a freshly slain stag. The young prince reared back his horse and brandished his sword, and the handsome stranger dogs ran off. His own hounds set upon the stag, pausing only to gaze up at the prince in bloody-mouthed gratitude. Before his hounds could finish their meal, the prince heard a powerful galloping, then a horn. A medium-sized man, clad in velvet robes and a simple but elegant coronet, rode a sleek black palfrey into the grove and stopped in front of the young prince. "Your dogs have stolen my stag," said the unknown king. "How do you propose to atone for their crime?" "Oh," said the young prince, I suppose you should tell me what I must do." "Very well," said the mysterious king. "I've heard of your prowess as a fighter. If you defeat my rival in one sure blow, I will consider your obligation fulfilled." "Very well," said the young prince. "I accept your challenge, sire." "There's one more condition," said the mysterious king. "You must defeat this rival in my form." The king snapped his fingers in a special formation in the direction of the young prince, who shivered and shook his head involuntarily. When the young prince looked again at the mysterious king, it was as if he were gazing in a mirror. The prince saw his own thick black hair, his own aquiline nose, his own scarred cheek. He looked down at his newly soft hands, felt his breeches suddenly loose around a smaller man's thighs. "What have you done?" said the young prince. "Don't worry," said the mysterious king, handing the prince his own coronet and robes. "Now take off your clothes." Melanie's not wrong. The rest of the book is like truly filthy.
I think it's a bit unfair that you stopped there, though.
Restraint is that's the new frontier. So I thought there's another project that I was working on while I was working on Politics, the Form of a Mortal Girl, and I have continued to work on it. And it's a series of prose poems called Position Papers, and sort of envisioning, instead of the fairy tale mythic past, it's a sort of mythic speculator. Number one, cars. In my country, we will have modular cars. Each car module will hold one person or a storage unit, and we will snap our modules together or apart. In our modular cars, we will not be lonely driving back from dinner or the reading to the same location after coming to dinner or the reading from different locations. We will have the option of going home together, debriefing on the way, so when we get home, we can go right to bed. And we will save fuel this way, so the fuel will not be precious, will be made of plastic waste. Our modular cars will run on composted Apple IIe's, predictor kits, rainbow barrettes, Palm Pilots, and parts of station wagons, which we will train special bacteria to first eat, then shit out in the form of a paste. Fairly compensated workers with collective bargaining rights will collect this paste. And other fairly compensated workers with collective bargaining rights will turn this paste into fuel, and still other fairly compensated workers with collective bargaining rights will deliver, sell, and insert the fuel. Or maybe the workers will come to decisions through a consensus model and will not own so much as share the means of production. In my country, 1/7 the size of the current United States and not so federated, we will systematically use up all the broken plastic objects people's step aunts and fathers have been hoarding in their garages. We will thank our hoarding relatives and comrades in our minds as we watch the stars from our downy bed, all talked out. Oh. Then this started because I thought, you know, it would be cool to have, this is like before apps. I had this idea. I was like, it'd be cool to just write down all my positions on things and like put them up on a website. And if people were like, what do you think about this? I'll just like, here's what I think about cell phones. Position paper number 3, cell phones. In my new country, we will have various and more efficient systems of communication, including trees. If we want to tell someone we don't like how they were talking to us in the car, or if we need to apologize. It's fun to read these at Gay Week. Or if we need to apologize for our abrupt departure, we will leave notes to such effect nestled in the dogwood trees. If we have found a cache of photographs of baby and grown animals in amusing configurations, we will string those photographs up on the tap lines of the sugar maples. On the peeled back bark of the silver birches, like tall, thin advent calendars, we will conduct our ongoing civic debates about whether something is a poem or a prose, and other questions of aesthetics or category that occupy some of us. For instance, brick or slate, vata or pitta. Should we reclaim certain mean words or create kinder and more accurate words? In apple trees and avocado trees and pear trees, in all orchards, actually, we will leave our love letters, which if never claimed will have the virtue of entertaining us while we pick fruit for other people to eat, which will be one of our rotating jobs. To the amber sap of the evergreens, we will stick folded up reports of the doings of our comrades in other countries, reports from the field and the stream and the city street. When we wish to ask people to take walks or come to couples counseling with us, we will flag the trees nearest to their houses with coated squares of colored cloth. From sapling, Paloma, I'm totally, it was, right? From sapling's delicate limbs, we will dangle our friend requests. And around the magnolia gnarls, we will tie with ribbons the notices of our name changes and new pronouns. Wedged into the thick, ratty bark of the pines, we will leave invitations to housewarmings, and to the large public events we will all take turns curating monthly. In the hollows of the eldest redwood trees, I will leave my epics, my catalogs, my Icelandic sagas of how I miss your smell and your meatloaf and your every little way. Let's see, I think I'll read 2 more from here. How's my time? Position paper number 10, police. In our new country, we will each take 3 full-year terms responding to trouble situations, once in youth, once in prime, and once in old age. In youth and old age, we will decide and plan, and in our prime, we will take instructions nicely. Remembering perhaps the disastrous and brilliant innovations of our youth, and also piling up ideas for later, should our country's future be at all similar to our present. We will cycle in together, young and middle, young and old, and for the first month of our turn, our group will watch and help the exiting group. We will learn from these levers the current map, which rivers prefer to flood, which animals need migration escorts, whose home relationships need witnessing or interruption, which faults will likely soon rumble, which border towns tend to run out of hostel beds and extra food and welcome packets, which embankments the sea most often batters, the most intricate or obscurely laid out building layouts, obscurely renovated apartment building layouts, the rough location of any ongoing imbalance. Before and during our terms, we will study rocks, water, earth, animals, urban planning, computational modeling, shame, panic, mental illness, how to talk kindly to many other people, and the brutal histories of the old countries. In our groups, we may choose to take and refine certain roles: brawn, empath, fast thinker, pessimist, prevention teacher, chef. Or we may all share all. We will spend our year in the town or neighborhood where we know the most people and where we are the most known, living together in a central whereabouts. Each responder's house will have an elaborate kitchen garden and town-stocked larder, a departure pole, all manner of hoses, hatchets, patching supplies, sandbags, lifeboats, and specialty vehicles. A warren of soundproof therapy and massage and quietness rooms, and at least one dog and 2 cats, plus an animal-free wing for the badly allergic. When chaos reveals itself, as it does and forever will, we will meditate for a short or a long while before we move on. Will I read one more from the, I'll read one more old one and then some new ones. I'm gonna just read some, I'll read one more old one. Lawns. Position paper number 7, lawns. I think about lawns so much, you guys, all the time. In the country and town of the new country, we will have goats, and for our goats, who are also their own goats, we will have varietal and heirloom grasses, and so if we want to have lawns, we will have lawns, and we well might because of deer ticks, and also to play lawn sports such as badminton or reading or lying about in birthday hammocks, imagining ourselves in the English countryside, re-signifying to our heart's content as goats eat the variety buffet of grasses, and later we will drink milks and eat cheeses. Goats will eat as they like and stay cozy in sheds in the winter, visited by indifferent neighborhood dogs. When it is very cold, the goats will all come inside via special passage to the wood stove room, and we will watch Grand Illusion or Le Voyage dans la Lune on a projector run on stored up shine from the summer. And when we have used our summer sun, we will take a shift at the gym to turn our high spirits and hard emotions into energy. We will turn our misspoken words and botched romantic gestures, our quarterback fashion fantasies and stray tufts of anger all into energy. And we will pour that sweat and huff and tempered resentment into battery cells, which we will sled home so we can watch century-old light flicker onto sheets on the straw bale walls, relishing our increased ability to flow blood, cozying among baby goats and humans, and looking out from the bunker or tinted moon to the snow-deep lawn, that various field. So these are in a chapbook that was so fun. I love making chapbooks. And then I had a teacher who, Dara Wire, who said, you could just write these for the rest of your life, which is very freeing to feel like, oh, okay, a series. Like you never have to think of a new idea. You can just write the series forever. That's the fiction writer. And that's the novelist in me, just like one idea, please. And maybe, who knows? Is this a novel? I don't know. I'm going to read a few more of the newer ones and then, yeah. So, do I have time to read a few more? I do. I don't know. What is time? Okay. Position paper number 11. Also, the numbering is... I'm not going to say it's meaningless, but what are numbers? They're imaginary, right? They're imaginary? Okay. Position paper number 11, the Pacific Gyre. In our new country, all toilets will be composting toilets, inside or outhouse, some with wide stalls for wheelchairs, some with built-in steps for small humans, mostly sit down, and some with urinals. For easy collection of the pee, we will feed microbial fuel cells from which we will later shear electricity. And we will build such clever sewers, such mighty storm drains to catch and store our gutter junk until the collectors come by. When we bicycle our collection carts through the city, we might stop at a neighborhood tea house on our break to hear the latest news or play some dominoes. Or maybe we'll take our hot drinks to go in metal flasks made from melted down padlocks and chain link fencing. Head down to the piers for a while to sip and think, to watch the waves beating thoughtlessly. Our single airport, located at the hub of all light rail, will house planes fueled by switchgrass for certain foreign travel and emergency medical needs. Our sturdy computer devices, also made of metal and glass, will run on photonic crystals and our own body heat. Each neighborhood syndicate or village will have its own small allowance of self-healing plastics to keep needles sterile, to impede electrical currents, for all the deep new research. And we will declare one-off holidays for our scientists, paint murals of invention victories, share ideas with our comrades in other lands. All of us will devote several weeks a year to a cleanup project, where we will in teams remediate the wild excess of our ancestors and contemporaries in whatever part of the world is most affected, and after securing the invitation of the people who live there. Some of us will sail our solar boats right up to the ocean gyres and dump special cultured plastic-eating bacteria into the water. We will approach oil leak sites in our bigger ships, powered by the very oil we suck up into reusable, oil-loving carbon nanotube sponges which really exist. And everyone, adult and child, will spend a week every year on a close or faraway beach, handpicking trash from sand and strand. And we will take all the time we like to swim, to build elaborate wash-away sculptures, to meet on inner tubes a few fathoms out for impromptu floating book groups, to sleep in the sun, to tuck our human bodies back into the soft ridges of our home, this fine, rare planet. Okay. The reason I was thinking to read these is because Oliver read yesterday this beautiful sestina that he wrote in conversation. We were in this group where it was, a bunch of us were writing 100 words a day. I mean, a bunch of them were writing 100 words a day. I did not do as many. And then we would each respond, like we each had a day of the week. And so like I was before Oliver, and so he was sort of charged with taking some little tidbit from mine to write his, and I took from the person before me. But I wanted to read the position paper that I think is the one that came before Oliver's beautiful sestina. And it's position paper number 22, Gay Pride. In the new country, we will parade on irregular occasion and in small packs through some adjacent streets at dusk, or maybe in the morning light. We will wear elaborate costumes to honor our beloved elders from the old countries, or imagine our beloved descendants in future worlds. We will bring with us small wrapped sweets, pretty stones, maybe a few lines of a poem, tied up in string, anything shiny. Little stuff we will offer to people we don't recognize, and which they will open later in secret joy, a reminder of the pleasures to be found with strangers. Provincetown poem. And I've got one more, and this is like the gayest thing I ever wrote. And I just want to read it. Also, in my group, we've been talking about animals. So this poem is called Faggot Dinosaur, and it was written for a collection called Faggot Dinosaur by curated or edited by Ali Bagat. And so everybody wrote poems called Faggot Dinosaur, or stories, or wrote things called, I think it might have been all poems. This is a poem, Faggot Dinosaur. Dear Indo-Hyas, tiny tranpaw of dolphins, tiny deer in Kashmir, you even-toed ungulate hiding in grasses and eating the soft parts of plants, like artichokes probably, or baby mesclun salads, maybe with ticklish fronds and a light vinaigrette, you tender-pawed sister of the mouse deer who hid in ponds from gay-bashing hawks. Dear Indo-Hyas, thank you from 48 million years later, for being cute and spawning whales, for passing down your clever hiding underwater strategies, which we needed, but which taxed our mammal lungs, where we also store our grief. Dear Scutellosaurus, in your suit of armor, walking around on 2 feet unless you feel like getting on all fours, hey. Hey, and thanks. You know, for decorating yourself with panels, some flat and some pitted, to keep off the biters, for giving us the idea of sequins, for being switchy. We're standing on the flat panels of your shoulders, ancestor. Dear Truodon, so smart and so small, seeing in the dark of any club or ramble, you perceive depths and eat everything. And maybe when you get older, you'll brood the eggs someone else laid, and you're different from the other theropods, even though they don't know how, but we do. And we thank you, and we wouldn't have named you Wounding Tooth like it's your fault the bigger predators tried to kill you, and because we appreciate your cutting sense of humor and how later you turned into a bird. Thank you.
Let's hear it for Andrea Lawlor. Wow. Wow. So now I'd like to invite Amy Shiner to the stage, who is one of Melissa's students, to introduce Melissa.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. I first encountered Melissa Febos after I got out of a treatment center and was trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. Along my healing journey, Melissa's first book, Whip Smart, taught me you can be broken and still be whole. Abandoned Me helped me navigate relationships, the ones we create and the ones that we have thrust upon us. Her book of memoirs came to me at a fortuitous time. My mother's sudden death had left me with such abandonment that I feared I would disappear. Yet in her second book, Melissa says, I must face the things that scare me in order to survive. And these words not only ensured her survival, but my own. Girlhood gave language to what I already knew, that my existence as first a girl and then a woman came with a trauma not exceptional but communal, but it is through her writing that I have gained community. By the time I read Bodywork, I was teaching my own creative writing classes, discussing craft not as I learned it in the classroom, but as I learned it from the body, and I continue to return to this book for guidance. Needless to say, I am intrigued to see what comes of the dry season. If I had to think of a word to describe Melissa, it would be authentic. It is through her authenticity that she gives others permission to live their truth, unobstructed and without shame. She writes, we all craft a story we can live with, the one that makes ourselves easier to live with. This is not the one worth writing. To write your story, you must face a truer version of it. Melissa Febos earned her MFA at Sarah Lawrence College and is currently a professor at the University of Iowa. She is the author of 4 books, Whip Smart, Abandoned Me, Girlhood, and Bodywork, and her forthcoming novel, The Dry Season. She has received a Guggenheim Fellowship in Nonfiction, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and a 4-time MacDowell Fellowship. She has contributed to the New York Times, the Paris Review, and Vogue. Her accolades include a Sarah Verdone Writing Award, the Jean Cordova Nonfiction Award from Lambda, and a National Book Critics Circle Award. Her writing has been declared an art of confession that holds sacred power, capable of transforming us individually and collectively. Please help me welcome to the stage Melissa Febos.
Oh, thank you. I have all my stuff. Sorry. That was so good, Andrea. Thank you so much, Amy. What a week. It just has felt like home, hasn't it? I was thinking today about how I grew up on the Cape, further up Cape, and when I was a young teenager and definitely already knew I was queer and felt very alone, I used to skip school and hitchhike here and just look at the adult queers and be like, maybe someday. And here we are. Thank you, Andrea, for bringing us all here, and to all my fellow faculty. I've been so inspired by your work and your friendship. I've laughed so hard this week. Huge thanks also to David, Sarah, Stephanie, Brianna, Miracle, and most of all, the writers in my class who have been so brave in writing this week and sharing very fresh, very raw, beautiful work. I was tempted to read something comfortable, and that just felt cowardly. So I am also going to read Work in Progress from The Dry Season. It is nonfiction, and whatever those beautiful last words that Amy said about it being like sacred, this is not that. When I practiced it earlier in front of Danica, I got the giggles, and it might happen again. So we'll see. The Dry Season is about a period of time that I spent celibate. Intentionally, and this is sort of about why. The last person I had sex with before I stopped having sex was a comedy writer. She was going through a divorce and had the manic eyes of someone desperate to escape their current situation. In the Brooklyn lesbian tradition, we did not call our first date a date, but simply dinner, and therefore maintained the possibility that it was not a date, just a meal between potential friends until we decided whether or not we wanted it to be a date. We met at a wobbly table in a nice-ish restaurant on Fulton Avenue. She was beautiful in the candlelight with high cheekbones and a shapely mouth, though ironically, our senses of humor seemed incompatible. She barely laughed at my jokes and didn't make any herself. As I sawed into my cauliflower steak, the biggest scam of all vegetarian entrees, though I kept optimistically ordering it in all the little restaurants of New York City that had discovered they could charge $36 for a slab of fibrous water sprinkled with capers, she squinted at me. "Is this a date?" she asked. "I don't know, is it?" I said. I didn't mean for it to sound like a riddle, but it did. Things deteriorated further. She spoke about her ex-wife in a bereft, castigating tone, and I nodded vaguely. Still, she texted me the next day, and I didn't hesitate to respond. We flirted all day, which was more fun over text than it had been in person, though our jokes did keep failing to land. I texted her while I ran on the treadmill at the gym, while my students wrote in class, at red stoplights on the drive home, and while I brushed my teeth, spattering my sleep t-shirt with toothpaste as I smiled at my phone like a baby. I tried to forget the bored feeling I'd had in her presence, which had seemed reciprocal, and the way her grief had repelled me like an alarm I got used to. Instead, I thought about her beautiful face and the way my body vibrated when my phone did with her messages. I found my jokes funny. Maybe that was enough. We kept this up, and a week later, I flew out of state for a reading. During the trip, our texts accelerated in a sexual direction. Tucked in the stiff white sheets of the hotel bed, I called her, and we masturbated together without speaking, just our breath in each other's ears. After I returned, we met up again, but skipped dinner this time, as if dinner had been the problem. Instead, I put on some Nina Simone, and we perched on my gray sofa drinking seltzer. 2 weeks of sexy text messages had not improved our rapport. We went to bed abruptly, as if it were the only way to end the conversation. Every time I hear that laugh of Alex's, I'm like... Though I had stubbornly tried to prove otherwise, for me, sex without chemistry or love was a horror, and I felt quietly horrified as we lay together in my bed. None of the excitement of our text correspondences translated. We were strangers, and though I liked to fantasize about fucking strangers, in reality, it felt outrageous to touch a stranger's genitals or let a stranger touch mine. Still, it felt inexcusably rude to interrupt the interaction after all those texts. So I brought her to orgasm with my hand and then lay there for a few moments before slithering out of the bed and into the bathroom. People here have had some bad sex. That's what I know. Mercifully alone behind the closed door, I splashed cold water on my face and avoided the mirror. I considered how to get her out of my apartment without being a complete asshole. I spat into the sink and then pressed my hands against my face, as if I could smear it away and start over. "Don't you think you should take a break?" my mother asked me when I was 32. I had just ended a 3-year relationship to a woman I think of as my best ex. Before my best ex, I had not been single since my first relationship at 15. I had been preoccupied with one person or another since I was 11 years old. "A break is probably a good idea," I told my mother. I did not divulge that I had already begun a new relationship with the person whom I betrayed my best ex by kissing. The worst 2 years of my life followed. All the wisdom I'd ever gleaned from therapy sloughed away, and I was reborn, smooth and stupid. I behaved as if possessed and tolerated emotional pain that now defies credulity. It was worse than kicking heroin, worse than the migraine that had split my skull at 16 and the spinal tap that followed. I would rather endure a daily spinal tap for the rest of my life than relive that time. Still, I chose her day after day for 2 years. Giving up that kind of attachment can be harder than giving up a drug, I found at the end of it. When I crawled back onto the shore of my life and surveyed the wreckage, I thought, I should take a break. Then I got into another relationship. After it, another, then another, then another, then another. I actually counted these out. I'm not exaggerating. After every one, I thought, I should take a break. Each of these entanglements had a frantic tinge, like the last handful of popcorn you cram into your mouth after you decide to stop eating it. It is not easy to stop a 20-year habit. I'd been yoked by the desire of others for most of my life. However painful, however limited my power, it was simple. Though I was capable of changing myself in many other areas, when I became unhappy in love, I changed my partner. It seemed easier to change the hardware than the operating system. Changing your own operating system is slow labor. I'd done it before. Change is creative work. I worried the uncertainty. What would govern me if not this old familiar moon looking new every night? I suspected that the last cis man I dated was the last one I would ever date, a title he may or may not appreciate holding. Not if he ever hears this. He was an old college friend who had the weekend. When I called another friend to complain about a bad date with a woman, she told me to call him. Call him and have him come, she said. It'll make you feel better. She was straight. This sounded unlikely, unlike me in every way. How do they do it? Ones who make love without love, wrote Sharon Olds. These are the true religious, the purest. I don't date men anymore, I reminded my friend. So what? She said. If I remember correctly, you're capable of enjoying sex with them. You can stop if you don't like it. Was that true? One of the things that I remembered about sleeping with men was that it was hard to stop, even if you didn't like it. It felt easier to just keep fucking them, because then you wouldn't have to up emotionally afterward. It was easier to keep fucking them than to find out how awful they might be when sexually thwarted, a potential I knew was hard to overestimate. Masculinity was a glass vase perpetually at the edge of the table. My old college friend was a feminist, I reminded myself. I'd always thought of him as a nice guy, by which I meant that he wasn't terrible. The bar for straight cis men was basically underfoot. But I'll try something different. It was as easy as my friend had promised. I called him and he came right over. The sex was just... The novelty of his cock was momentarily thrilling. Within a couple of minutes, I recognized the familiar tedium of being thrust upon. I knew what came... You have to hold it together. I knew what came next, and it was not me. It took a few more minutes for me to realize that I was waiting for it to be over. It took another few to muster the gumption to tell him to stop. But then, before I could speak, he sputtered to a finish, and there was no need. To my dismay, the last man assumed that he would be staying over. Even when I watched pornography featuring straight men, I wanted to disappear them as soon as I came. Sometimes I even slammed the computer shut before I finished my orgasm. I pretended to run an errand so that he would leave with me. After we parted ways at the corner, I doubled back. As I closed the apartment door behind me, the pleasure of solitude was so great that I leaned my back against the door with a groan. My bedroom, having been intruded upon, felt sanctified in his absence. After he went back to California, the last man started writing me letters. He wrote me a letter every day for the next 6 months, an act that now seems deranged, though at the time it charmed me. While in a sanatorium for his tuberculosis, the French theorist Roland Barthes fell in love with another patient. Though the man was straight, Barthes wrote him letters every day for 6 months. The letters convinced the man to love Barthes. The ones sent by my old college friend did the trick, however. Like Catherine of Siena, who is considered one of the greatest letter writers of the 14th century, he was a very good writer of letters. That, combined with the 4,000 miles between us, was a powerful aphrodisiac. After we'd been dating for a few months, he asked me why I had never introduced him to any of my friends. "Are you ashamed to be dating a man?" he asked me. Yes, I answered. While dating the last man, I fantasized about having a baby almost constantly. I was 34. The last man would have been a good father, I often thought. But whenever we spent more than one day together, I couldn't wait to get away from him. His need for my attention emitted a very high-pitched whine, like a mosquito audible only to me. When I broke up with him, he tried to talk me out of it. "You'll regret it," he sputtered. I almost laughed in surprise, but restrained myself. "Maybe," I said, "but I don't think so." "You're making a colossal mistake," he shouted. Sometimes I still roll the phrase around in my mouth like a lozenge, a colossal mistake. My friend Jenny and I met at the new cafe in the neighborhood to work together. After a couple of hours spent typing on our laptops at adjacent tables, we broke for lunch. Jenny has beautiful curly hair, a raspy voice, and had been single then for almost 3 years. Over our exorbitantly priced grain bowls, I explained to her that I planned to spend 90 days celibate. "Something needs to change," I explained. Jenny thoughtfully finished chewing her mouthful of farro and swallowed. "So you're going to give up sex for 3 months?" She laughed richly then, like a villain in a children's cartoon, and then concluded, "Fuck you, Melissa." "There are different kinds of celibacy," I insisted. I wanted to elaborate that being incel was so very different from being, well, volcel, but I knew how incredibly annoying that would sound. I also wanted to describe all the different kinds of celibacy I'd been reading about, the Beguines and the Mystics and the Shakers and the Amazons, but that too rung pitifully in my own mind. Making a study of my experience was a strategy that helped me to approach a challenge, but I knew better than to mistake my motive for a rhetorical one. Jenny wouldn't be fooled. In the context of her life, my celibacy was ridiculous. This was as true a fact as the radical nature of it in my own. Being a memoirist had instilled in me a tolerance for the contradictory truths of personal experience. So I said nothing and laughed with her at myself, which was also correct. My independent study did not venture very far into male celibacy. The male monks, unlike the Beguines, could not live among the poor or anyone and remain celibate. It was the great struggle of their lives. Even cloistered away in hair shirts, they started raping donkeys and molesting novice monks. For them, celibacy was a punishment, a great deprivation, cause for war with themselves. They had no freedom to gain, only freedom to lose. I suppose that was what world dominance got you. Having nothing left to gain could be a vulnerable position, though not one for which I had much curiosity or sympathy. My position was not one for which all would have sympathy either, not my friend Jenny, nor most of my exes. I had been thinking about my exes because I had decided to make a comprehensive list of them to review during my celibacy. The task of inventorying my history of love seemed appropriately onerous. I was always making the same kinds of mistakes, like falling in love or a simulacrum of it with a manic writer of letters, or sleeping with people who I actually just wanted as friends. Throughout life, all of love's failures resemble one another, and with reason, they all proceed from the same flaw, wrote Barth in A Lover's Discourse. In my case, I suspected it was more than one flaw. My life had always more or less functioned as a treat-based economy. For many years, and still to some extent, I lived for the next reward: a bag of heroin, a drink, a flirt, a cigarette, a cookie, a kiss. Mostly, the objects of my obsession had occurred in a descending order of lethality. For years, it had seemed I was always quitting something. At this point, I was left only with sexual intrigue and exercise, of all things. I went to a book party in Tribeca, the kind that's held in a private apartment whose owner is unclear, though it is clear that they are very rich. It was an unseasonably warm day, a harbinger of the scorching months to come. As I walked downtown from the train, I passed under a row of Callery pear trees, Pyrus caleriana, which, when in bloom, smell unmistakably like semen. In case you were wondering, which I did for many years. Though I was not interested in semen, my body hummed with a summery kind of excitement. I had put on nice clothes and some eyeliner, and the Callery pear trees smelled of possibility. My friend publishing the book wore one of those dresses that looked like someone threw a beautiful piece of fabric at her from some distance, and it landed on her body in just the right configuration. I kissed her and shouldered my way across the loft, declining a stem of champagne and filled a paper napkin with sweating cheese cubes. I spotted a well-known lesbian in publishing who was at least 20 years my senior, seated on a pink sofa that matched the celebrant's book cover. I parked myself on the other end of the sofa, and when she struck up a conversation, something began to kindle. As we chatted, I imagined how it would feel to consummate our lazy flirtation. I keenly saw the moment when my excitement at the chase would pivot into disappointment because I was not really attracted to my conversation partner. As our talk bumped along, my listening face started to feel like a leering mask. The oil from the cheese slowly seeped through the napkin and slicked my fingers. The woman asked questions formulated to draw me out, but did not absorb my answers, which beaded like rain on her glassy exterior. The Pyrus scalariana emits what is known as a volatile amine to attract pollinating insects, which are compelled by the scent of ammonia, which is also found in semen. The woman did not smell like ammonia, but expensive cologne, and she was not across the room, but leaning on her elbow right next to me. Her gaze looked at me and through me at the same time. The previous summer, I had intended to take a break. I had broken up with the last man, a colossal mistake, just before I went to an artist residency in Vermont. Though artist residencies are known fields of sexual pursuit, I told my friends that I was planning on taking a sexual sabbatical. Override 20 years of conditioning. I brought an ugly pair of clogs to the residency. The first week of the residency, I wore the clogs every day to yoga class. Up to work at 6 a.m., I walked in the woods alone, and I abstained from the bread that they served. I inhaled yeasty perfume and felt virtuous and in control. I began an affair with a sculptor. She was 25 years old. Such a thing would have been achievable at any earlier point in my life. The boundary that prevented me from being tempted by wavered. I had exclusively. Well, I was not dating the 20 said, mostly myself. One night, I lay across her lap while she fucked me, a position that I had enjoyed with other lovers. I liked to be cradled, to feel precious, somewhere between an armful of flowers and a dish of steaming food set before a ravenous diner. As she fucked me in the perfect dark of my studio, the irony of being a baby by someone so much younger than I was leapt through the sudden chill. After that, eating the bread in the dining hall. Soon, I was eating hardly anything but the bread, great slabs of it at every meal, slathered in butter. I began smoking cigarettes until midday. I never again. And in fact, my last act before leaving the residency was to throw them in a dumpster before I drove away. The romantically interested person, the seeker of sexual intrigue, might be seen as embodying a form of ecstasy from the Greek crisis, to be or oneself, a removal to elsewhere. We have an amorous narrative for this state and hormonal explanations for the emotional component, though it was quickly becoming clear to me that a person in that state of ecstasy was no more in love with their subject than a wolf, a rabbit, a grouse with an acorn, a junkie with a sudden taste of her throat. Away the great swing that obscured it, I could see how those habitually compelled by intrigue were almost robotic in their pursuit, like sex Roombas. Having become an observer as often as a participant in this dynamic in the last 2 months, I had come to understand that it was not a complex sex room. The of heedless. The people I gravitated to or would have did not see me, only a source of what promised to sate their hunger, but never would. They were outside themselves, outside of the place where resides. By they, I mean me for most of my life. We had never been in this together. We had only each been alone, place with the same goal. Thank you so much.
Can you guys just sit on up here and we'll
Cool, thank you.
Okay, we're going to do a little Q&A, and remember, you have to speak into the live stream for all of the people watching on the home. So, does anybody have a, before we do that, can we have another big round?
We can just be together.
Because I'm paid to. This is a question I asked Alexander the other night. Like, how do you write about the things that scare the shit out of you?
It was scary when I first started doing it, right? Without a reference for it not being the end. I knew it, or it was much scarier. But having done it times now, I just love what has resulted from making that choice, from walking towards those subjects. And I have never regretted it. Even when sort of horrible things did happen as a result of writing scary things, it always still felt worth it to me. And the other thing I'll say is that before I start everything that I have ever written, that I will write it in total privacy, and I will maintain that privacy for as long as I.
Such good advice. I just write fiction.
I'm grinning so much in this mask, my face hurts. It's a necessary follow-up. And for both of you, someone who writes very secretly in her own world, what questions do you ask yourself to decide? What that?
Start with, I mean, I think I read things out to myself. I think this is my workshop earlier today. I think if I find go get a cup of coffee, or vacuum, I know that it's not ready. The place I do a lot of editing, I probably drive my editing process as well. Yeah. I
Like, it's possible at the beginning of writing, or really at any place during the writing, how at the end, writing any is conducting a relationship with tools and a finite amount of content, and totally changed by the end of it. It's one of the is that I feel very differently towards the content than I did in the beginning. And in fact, probably the most reliable sign that I'm done with something, I get really excited to share it with people, even if I was petrified in the beginning, you know? So I think I do a lot of even most of the things allowed even to my therapist at the beginning. I cannot begin to imagine an audience, you know? But at the end, it's...
Hi.
Hi, Cass.
Hey, Cass.
This question is unformulated, so I'm going to try to find it in real time. So please indulge me. But I wonder how both of you contend with aspects of gay shame in your writing. And that, I mean, something that emerges for me when I'm writing is that I feel so protective of queerness that I often to always glorify it or pay some homage to it or just sort of buffer it from scrutiny. And can prevent some exploration of the ways that we actually really hurt each other and the ways that we're collectively traumatized, ways that we're not holding ourselves and each other accountable. And so it's like a place I get really stuck, and I just wonder, both of you, but I know you, Melissa, like work from like personal materials. I just wonder, how do you like negotiate that conflict?
I've thought about this so much. It's like just an ongoing part of my relationship to working, and like one of the very familiar voices that on good days in the background. And I think, you know, I do feel much more sort of serene about it at this point, because I think when I started writing, I was trying to please everybody. And maybe I was even trying to particularly court the reader who wasn't on my side, who wasn't a part of my community. My voice was the loudest when I felt like I needed to sell them on, which the bad things, and not writing about abuse in queer relationships and all of it, you know, shame. But it's like when I let the hypothetical gaze and priorities of that person into the room when I'm writing, it becomes impossible. Like, it's like the bot on Twitter that's gonna reply to, you know, it's all of it, right? And I think this is probably related very much to what Alex is talking about in his class this week too. And I think I am such a people pleaser and so codependent that I was like, I can't have any of you in the room actually at all. I just need to like send you in a Titanic submersive while I am writing. I didn't mean that to sound as hellfire as it did, but I just can't. I can't even write with my imaginary mom in the room, you know? And so I just populate that space with people I trust. Sometimes it's just a younger version of me. It's just like the one person who most needs the thing I'm trying to write and will be comforted by it and nourished by it, right? But really it's like this room, like truly. It's basically this room. Like I would not read that in every room. But yeah, I'm just picturing all of you. And when I do that, it so much becomes possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think so much of what you just said, Melissa, really resonates for me. I think when I'm actually writing, I'm trying not to imagine any readers, honestly. But in general, I think I'm always writing for queer and trans people. That just feels like I don't care to explain things to people just in general. And I also feel like the sort of lineage of queer and trans writers who've written things you're not supposed to say is so old and so long and so powerful. And so sometimes it's just like reading old, like, I mean, like, I think about like Jane DeLynn had a book called Bad Sex is Good in like 1991 or something like that. Like people have been talking about all the things we're talking about all the time for so long, and that gives me a lot of courage to feel sort of like, yeah, other people have done this. I think about like Samuel Delaney writing about all kinds of sex a person might not actually want to have. Or might, and just like putting it out there on science fiction imprints, and just like there are a lot of people who've come before us who've made work that has like made our work possible, and so that is really cheering for me. In terms of like spiritual honesty, if I could even talk about that, which I don't, I think I just try to imagine my partner reading what I'm writing and hope that, it feels true. So I think that's like the person who knows me best. I want to read what I'm writing and say like, yeah, no, that's not bullshit. Like that's real. So that feels really important to me. Yeah, I also think about, Jordy and I were in, was it West Palm Beach, Florida, at a public library for this reading many years ago, and it was when my novel came out, and I had been like, some very cute gay punk librarians had invited me, and I got there, and it was many seemingly straight senior citizens. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm gonna do a different set of selections than I thought. And I got up there and I had it, this is gonna be okay. It's gonna be. And then these like little non-binary looking punk teenage, emerging adult types walked in and sat down late, and I was like, oh, fuck. Like, now I have to actually read the real thing. And so it's like, you just gotta be doing it for the, yeah. Thanks.
This is not a point of clarification. In short, didn't you end up reading the anal fisting scene at the West Palm Senior Center, right? And I remember the seniors loved it.
And also because it's obviously the Jordy and Andrea Roadshow. Was it not a lovely gentleman who regaled us with some stories about his college roommate and asked about maybe what the meaning of some of those feelings were? Yeah, so it has a ripple effect.
So this is a two-part question. One part is for each one of you. Melissa, are you ever writing fiction in the future? Are you ever, Andrea, thinking of writing nonfiction in the future?
Like Freaky Friday.
I feel like we should just leave it at that. Every time I publish a work of nonfiction, I think I'm going to write a novel next. But it's tricky because it's like a truth serum. Once I call it fiction, I start hiding, But I actually think with my last book, and maybe with this one that I'm finishing, I've really sort of like this, and I keep having novel ideas. I actually think the next thing is going to be a novel. Yeah, that's where I started. That's my great love as a reader. So
I'm so excited. Yeah. Thinking about writing any fiction. Nope. No siree. Nope. I mean, that's the closest I'll go. Wait a minute. Danica has something.
I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm sorry.
Hi, Myra. Thank you so much. My question is, and we're going to back up to sharing your work with your partner and like tormented by sharing work with her. And so there's a thing. But share, who do you share your work with, and how abundantly do you share your work? Do you have a cluster of people you always send your stuff out to? Stuff like that. Thanks. And if you could get into the mind sharing thing, that would be like really great.
That's a great question, Myra. Danica is absolutely my first reader for anything that I have a first reader on, or almost everything. And I think it has a lot to do with Andrea said earlier, where she's the person who knows me best and will recognize bullshit immediately. I should just, when I'm hiding or when I'm going off, or she just has an ear for when I'm being true. And that's the most important for me in early stages. I will say that has not always been the case. I had partners in the past where we had a good relationship, and it just, that part of it did not work. And that was okay too. Because there were other people who could do it. And I was so relieved when I figured out that I stopped part of the relationship, because it was really painful and we were both sort of hurting each other. And now I have a trusted sort of stable of close friends who are not all writers, who read specifically certain things really well. I have an anthropologist friend who understands structure in a different kind of way. Poet friends are great for the line and images, and so on and so forth. The last thing I'll say about it is that I've learned to be much more proud of my work than I was. Like, honestly, I think it's brave to show up with a room full of people about each other. I don't know that I could do it now. And I think also, hear from my own work, so I can take it so much further than I just can hear myself when I'm being true, or what needs to happen, and my work until I don't know what.
That really resonates. I mean, I feel like sharing my work with my partner is incredibly helpful, and sometimes we've had conflict. Offensive. And it helps that she is an amazing and writer, and in ways that I don't think and push. Also, I mean, I have other, like maybe, Jordy, one or two other close people who I would think to. And having worked with my editor at Hillary Plum, somebody I would definitely send anything new. And I feel like that kind of small press editorial relationship is it's so rare and so special, and it has kind of changed the way I think about, don't know how I would feel. I'm actually thinking, like, I want to take a class next summer so badly. And I was thinking, but then I'd have to be in a workshop. But that actually sounded maybe, but, maybe not fiction. Yeah.
Non-fiction.
No. No.
I want to say one more thing about this, which is that when I was younger, I didn't know between needing or being ready for feedback and needing encouragement, and that could be book results when I needed encouragement to ask for critical feedback could be really devastating. And so now, you know, I'm a golden retriever. I'm not like a miser of my word. I just want head pats, like a lot. And so when I start to get the strong urge to ask, I and ask myself, like, are you ready for that? Or are you just tired? Like, do you just need a hug? Because you don't have to show your work to anyone. You could just go get it. Or something Danika's really like, tell me this is a book. Working. Tell me if you like this narrative, you know, and not just free for all.
Thanks. This is for you, I guess. I'm just wondering if you find some tension between like kind of living your life as your narrative.
Thinking about writing about it while I'm living it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
I sort of wish sometimes that I could say yes, because that would justify some of the many stupid things I've actually no. I write as a response to what's happening in my life, and I'm not a very good thinker in my head. I make bad decisions. I have very strong other kinds of instincts. And so when I don't know if you know, when I get into trouble or into pain, I know writing is a really reliable way for me to find clarity and like access a higher, wiser, more mature part of myself that's not acting out of compulsion or from fear or avoidance. And so I tend to write my way out of hard situations or into forms of change that feel necessary or merciful, you know. But I don't think I ever, maybe one time, a friend sent me a link to a cuddle party, and I was like, I'm gonna go to this cuddle party and maybe I'll write a sassy little article about it. And then I wrote like 100-page essay that was the most excoriating piece of writing I've ever done in my life, and I hated every minute of it. I mean, I'm really glad I wrote it, but I hated writing it.